what her investment was all about, is to bring this city, and I love Kiev. It's a beautiful, beautiful city, and you know what? It looks really awful right now, and even dangerous. I mean, this is what American money is bringing democracy to Ukraine, destroying its capital.
Well, first of all, Victoria Nuland did not make a $5 billion investment in Ukraine. That's rubbish. Second of all, let's talk about Russia's investment. Russia cut gas prices to support Yanukovych. Russia is buying Ukrainian junk bonds of the Ukrainian government with the
they're Euro bonds. They're Euro bonds, Ariel. No, get your facts straight. Okay, they're Euro bonds. Russia wants its money back.
I have my facts straight very much.
Okay. No. I mean, just because Russia steps in to help out a neighbor. Helps a neighbor.
Russia is the main export market for many Ukrainian goods. It doesn't make sense an agreement with the European Union.
Russia is trying to bring Ukraine into the Eurasian Union.
Okay, keep going, Ariel. Keep going.
Yeah, so I'm saying is that Russia is expending billions and billions of dollars to bring Ukraine into the Eurasian Union, and the majority of Ukrainian people don't want to do that. But this policy of Russia pulling
they haven't signed the agreement
EU
yet.
and the United States involvement may bring to the breakup of Ukraine. That will be a catastrophe.
Russia breaking up Ukraine. Okay, that's a new one here. Okay, Marcus, let me go to Marcus here. Marcus, you know, it's very interesting to get our history straight. Let's get our history straight, okay?
Let me finish what I'm saying.
You made your point. It's Russia's fault. Marcus, if I can go to London. One of the interesting things is that when the Ukrainians said no, the elected, legitimate government of Ukraine said no to the association agreement, what happened? Let's remind our viewers. Russia stepped in and said, hey, why don't we have a trilateral discussion here where everyone can be a winner here. I'll give you a good example. Canada is in NAFTA. Canada has an association agreement with the European Union. Why can't Ukraine work with the Eurasian Union and work with the European Union? But no, I guess there's an exception here. Ukraine doesn't get that privilege. Marcus, go ahead.
Well, what Ariel said just now, that Russia's actions could result in the breakup of Ukraine, is absolute, utter nonsense. Victoria Nuland's comments demonstrate America's lip service to the concept of freedom and democracy. And we've got other examples of that. We saw late last year American politicians, Senator John McCain, flying into Ukraine, an independent, sovereign country, and joining the protest movement, meeting opposition leaders in calling for early elections in Ukraine and calling for the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, which is democratically elected. I'd like to say to Ariel,
why is it dangerous to have elections?
Russia is contributing to the riots in Ukraine.
That was a challenge.
Ariel, you made your comment, Ariel. Ariel, you made your comment that Russia is acting dangerously. Well, I don't see Russian politicians flying into Kiev and calling for the overthrow of a democratically elected government. How would you feel during the Wall Street protests if a Ukrainian politician flew in and started calling for the overthrow of the American government? Like the American government, you're just paying lip service to the concept of democracy. Russia has been abiding by international law in regard to Ukraine. It's not meddling. But let me also state as well, and it's important for you to realise this, and people watching this programme, Russia and Ukraine have historically close relations. Russia is not an alien country in Ukraine. If it was an alien country, why is it that over 60% of Ukrainians belong to the Moscow Patriarch of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church? That means most Ukrainians, their spiritual leader, is in Moscow. If they hated the Russians so much, they wouldn't be following the Moscow Patriarch. That's absolute nonsense.
To the Church of England at some point. That did not prevent America to be independent.
That's absolute nonsense. Let's stick to Ukraine. Let's be serious. Let's be serious now.
Let me go to Robert here. What do you think the European Union should be doing now? Because they're in Moscow, in Kiev, as we're recording this program here. I mean, should they back away, or do you think they're going to continue to push here? Because I, first of all, don't understand why the European Union is trying to negotiate this. We've already seen what they want. They want to give a raw deal to the Ukrainians. They're going to force Yanukovych to reconsider. Why does outside powers have to force a government to reconsider its own domestic policy?
Well, many Western countries have been interfering in Ukraine for generations. The whole history of the West is trying to take control of this area, to try and limit Russia, to try and really restrict Ukrainian sovereignty. Ukrainian sovereignty should be respected by the European Union. The EU should back off. It should not be trying to export its regulations to Ukraine, which will damage their economy, cost it as much as £20 billion a year. It should be respecting sovereignty. It should not be meddling, and neither should the United States.
Get your numbers straight, please.
20 billion
You're
euros,
confused about the
160
numbers, and you
billion
don't
euros
give me a
until
source of the numbers.
2017. That will be the cost of EU regulations on the Ukrainian economy. It's already been
You just
bullying
made it
through
up.
restricting the amount of...
No,
That
I have not
is a
seen
figure
this
which has been
number, and
widely
you just
quoted.
made it up.
It is understood. Look at the massive unemployment within the EU. That is the
access of
effect of
Ukraine to the
European
EU
Union
will
regulations.
All right, gentlemen,
Ukrainian economy.
you're talking over each other, and no one hears a word you're
Absolutely
saying.
not.
All right?
Excessive regulation.
Hold it, guys. Hold it, guys. I know this is a contentious issue.
Widely accepted,
Jen,
even by the European Commission.
Ariel, Robert,
make it more
quiet,
transparent.
please.
How-
Okay.
how
All right, I'm going to go to
acceptable
Marcus.
is it?
I'll go to Marcus because he's listening. Okay, Marcus, where is this going here? Because I don't see any reason in the world why Mr. Yanukovych should blink. He's democratically elected. But what is the European Union going to say to these really savage people now in the Maidan? And you don't watch CNN and BBC. You're not decent. They're horrific. They're savage people, absolutely savage. Slavish what they're doing to police officers and other people that don't agree with them on the square. Where's it going, Marcus?
Well, the ones who are shooting them...
I'm going to Marcus.
I think Ukraine... Unfortunately, actually, Ariel, I'm speaking now. Unfortunately, Ukraine is on the brink. It could end up descending into a civil war. The whole country could break up. And I can't see how that's going to be averted. It will only be averted if Washington and Brussels categorically condemns the terrible, appalling violence that we're seeing perpetrated by neo-Nazi mobs on the streets of Kiev and also in the westernmost regions of Ukraine. But let's not forget, those mobs in Ukraine, they are stooges of the West and they are willing stooges of the West. If they weren't getting supported politically and logistically by the United States and the European Union, they probably wouldn't be out on the streets in the first place.
So in answer to your question, Peter,
I'm very, very concerned about Ukraine because the West will not stop supporting these horrendous people in the streets that are killing police officers. And also we had yesterday a governor in the westernmost region of Ukraine.
Okay, gentlemen, please, hang on. Ariel, let's connect some dots here, because when there was the Munich Security Conference recently, okay, when then these opposition figures went and met with American officials, okay, and European officials, they go back to Ukraine, and then the tone of intolerance. So we have to remember, Yanukovych said, okay, I'll bring you into the government. Okay, then just recently, an amnesty. Okay, what else do you want? We want you overthrown. I have to agree with Marcus. Where is that $5 billion? And that's a real number here. It's not a fantasy number of where this money from the American taxpayers to overthrow this government. That's where
you asked me how we can stop this nonsense, right? So I'll tell you how we can stop it. First of all, let's not make things up. The West will never support the neo-Nazis. The United States did not give $5 billion because we don't have $5 billion. I wish we did. I wish we did have $5 billion to give to Ukraine.
They don't condemn the SS veteran parades every year in the Baltic states, do they? Why doesn't America and the European Union...
Well, we're talking about Ukraine now.
SS veteran parades that we see every year in Estonia and Latvia. Right. Well, hang on. Why don't they condemn that if they don't object to the glorification
Peter asked me a question. I'm trying to answer.
What happens
I
every year in Estonia and Latvia?
Go ahead, Ariel.
Answer that one.
I think we should have a round table. I think we should have a ceasefire, a round table, and elections. And that's how we can stop this horrible,
who's going to be at the round table, Ariel? Give me your round table. Go ahead.
The round table will consist of the three opposition parties, and I detest Mr. Tyagnybok, the Svoboda, the Liberty Party, that because they have some Nazi sympathizers in them. I'm first one to denounce them, but they're part of the mix right now. Clearly, the right-wing sector, or the right sector, should not be at the round table. And they should be an accepted mediator, because these people do not behave as adults, to my great, great regret. Russia and the United States probably should stay out, and an acceptable figure from Europe should mediate.
The United States is in at the moment.
Whoever the both parties accept.
Marcus,
this is a reasonable solution.
Okay, go ahead, Marcus.
This is a reasonable solution. The alternative is a civil war.
Marcus,
you
jump in. I don't want to waste time.
It.
Gentlemen, Marcus, jump in.
Ariel, how can you say the United States government should stay out? The United States government has been playing a role in Ukraine from the very beginning, and I don't mean 2013 and 2014. I take that back to the 1990s. Let's remember, 1992, the Pentagon's Defense Planning Guidance
then let's talk about the Russian occupation of the 19th century.
Russia poses the greatest threat.
How far back are you willing to go?
Ariel, I'm talking. The Pentagon's Defense Planning Guidance in 1992 stated that Russia still poses the greatest threat to America's political dominance in the world, and that the states that used to be in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union should be brought into the EU and should be brought into NATO. Well, I'm very sorry, Ariel. You can discard documents like that, but that is the blueprint. That is the blueprint. And let's not forget, Zinoviev Brzezinski was saying in the 1990s that Ukraine should be brought into the European
we've run out of
Union
time.
and
Many
NATO.
thanks to my
That's
guests in
not
London and in Washington, and thanks to our...
Rediscover the iconic Mac 3. Up to 100% redness free and a money-back guarantee. With our blade pressure reducing design and the trust of millions of men. The new design Gillette Mac 3.
Today, girls as young as 8 face the worst day of their lives, their wedding day. Mary was forced out of school to marry a man more than twice her age. She can't guess what abuse lies ahead. Age 12, Yasmin was married and pregnant. She miscarried 3 times, her fragile body permanently damaged. You can help stop this by sponsoring a girl with Plan UK today. You can help build safer communities that keep girls out of child marriage and in school. Your sponsorship can mean education, healthcare, access to clean water, things that give a girl strength and hope. You'll love getting letters from the girl you sponsor and seeing the difference you make to her life. If you want to give a girl a chance in life, please text PLAN to 70099 or visit sponsoragirl.org and find out how you can sponsor a girl. Thank you.
Join Jackpot Joy today and you can win an holiday somewhere nice and hot. Come on boys, more action. Enter our free prize draw today.
Bullion by Post is the UK's #1 online bullion dealer. At Bullion by Post, we aim to make the process of buying gold and silver as easy as possible. You can buy bars and coins and get them delivered discreetly to your door. On our website, our prices are updated every 2 minutes and include free, fully insured delivery. To find out more, call us on 0121 403 3000 or visit us at bullionbypost.co.uk. reportedly killed in Ukraine's capital today as anti-government militants attack riot police with firearms, breaking a truce with the authorities. Law enforcers are authorized to fire live rounds in return. Rioters are resorting to hostage-taking, kangaroo courts and stealing weapons. Buildings are seized and looted around Kiev. Party's own crew has been stranded in a hotel caught in the crossfire between the militants and riot police. Also,
the Ukrainian government primarily responsible for making sure that it is dealing with peaceful protesters in an appropriate way.
rioters rejoice as the EU sets up an embargo targeting Ukrainian police, banning the sale of any law enforcement gear and equipment to Kiev. That as opposition leaders admit they have no control over the radicals in the streets. This is RT International with you 24 hours a day, live from our studio centre here in Moscow, where it's just turned midnight and 10 p.m. in Kiev, from where we bring you breaking news. Fighting still continues in the capital, with anti-government rioters now seizing control of 2 police stations and a district administration building. Gunfire and explosions have been heard in the city throughout the day. Meanwhile, officials are demanding the militants hand in their weapons and return to protesting peacefully. RT has a team of reporters and cameramen in the city.
The front line of the fighting has now moved further away from our hotel, which is in the very center of the city and right next to Independence Square. The rioters are now aiming to control government buildings here in Kiev. They have this hotel under full control, and there's a makeshift hospital downstairs where the injured are being treated by medics. Now, we also know that Ukrainian authorities have given the green light for police to use live rounds in order to protect themselves from the rioters, who also allegedly now are heavily armed with different types of weapons. And, well, a similar situation is happening in other parts of the country where rioters are storming various types of government buildings. For more about what was happening here in central Kiev just a few hours ago, when the intense fighting between the rioters and the police took place, Alexei Rashevsky went downstairs and managed to film basically the start of today's violence.
This does not look like a truce at all. Last night, the opposition and the president managed to agree on a ceasefire. But in the morning, in the sector, the core of this hardcore rebels decided to go on the offensive from the Independence Square, which generally looks like a battle zone right now after almost 72 hours of fighting and burning everything in its path. Right now, we saw that the police have been pushed away from this barricade they've been occupying for the last 48 hours. Last night I took a walk here, it was all covered with the police. Now you can see for yourself, the right wings are again reinforcing their barricades. We literally had to dodge bullets during several of our attempted live broadcasts because it was very, very unsafe here. Right now the police are pushed back. We can still hear flashbangs exploded. We can still see Molotov cocktails being thrown. The situation is very, very tense. We do know also that the government of Ukraine has implemented the so-called counter-terrorism operation mode, which would mean tougher security across the country. But right now this is pure mayhem. It isn't clear where it's going to go. The right-wing sector, the core of the protest, their leaders said last night that they knew nothing about the truth, that they would not listen to anyone, not the opposition, not the politicians of the government. They said that the revolution must continue until the very end. We also already saw several wounded being carried from this standoff point here at the barricade at the Institutska Street. What I saw, I think it was a gunshot wound. The man was bleeding heavily, but it's really unclear whether this was caused by a live round or anything else. Maybe it was a flashbang or anything of the kind. So the situation, it remains still very tense, and it's definitely far from being a truce.
Well, health officials now say 75 people from both sides of the conflict have been killed since the start of the week. However, opposition activists claim many more than that have died within their ranks today alone. Witnesses say bodies are strewn around the area. The bloodshed erupted when rioters broke a shaky truce with the government, which had only been established hours before. Well, our video agency roughly sent this footage of 2 police officers trying to help an injured colleague, and here you can see them being caught in an explosion of some sort. More than 10 police policemen have been killed since the clashes broke out a couple of days ago, and several hundred officers have been injured. Also, a score of policemen have been taken captive by the rioters. They're seen being lined up and taken to the militants' camp. Well, some of them were wounded, and we've obtained footage said to show one man needing an ambulance, but the rioters apparently refusing when they realise he's from the Special Forces. The former UK officer shared his thoughts with me on the police response in Ukraine.
What we're seeing is a situation that's moved from protest and conflict into what is really, as was termed by an earlier commentator, into to revolution. So I think it's gone beyond that. You know, if the police were armed in this situation now, then I think we would be becoming militarised anyway. So we are not talking about the usual policing of protest, but we're talking of something at a much higher level. So I think it's probably unavoidable. It's gone beyond that point on both sides. This has become a struggle between greater forces and those that are on the street. There are great political issues here. There are wider implications concerning the democracy and the finance, etc.
Well, you can see for yourself how the crisis has changed the very landscape of the capital on RT.com, our website. The once picturesque Independence Square in flourishing Kiev is contrasted with what it has now become. A wasteland cluttered with debris and rubble as people pick their way between raging fires. All that to the tune of gunfire, screaming and clashes as rioters battle with security forces. Reports and footage from the scene suggest the rioters now have access to pistols, assault rifles and grenades. The authorities are looking for ways to prevent the opposition from becoming a fully armed force. But the rioters and police aren't the only ones in danger of being hit by bullets. RT's Igor Piskunov is part of the RT crew that caught up in the crossfire.
For a few hours today, we really couldn't even exit the building because firing was going on all around this area. And while basically bullets were flying in from the windows, I show you this one. We found this bullet in one of the rooms, one of our rooms basically, inside this hotel. But holes in windows could be seen pretty much on all the floors. One of our cameramen was trying to film what was happening outside, and a bullet hit just below the camera, ricocheting off the wall. So thankfully he wasn't hit and wasn't injured, but two more shots were fired and just dropped to the ground. My colleague Alexei Yarashevsky was doing a live report just right here in the same exact room, and shortly after they were finished, another bullet just flew into the window, cracking it, and the cameraman of the Eruptly news agency, another bullet flew in, ricocheted off the wall, and just sort of slid his bulletproof vest. Thankfully, he wasn't injured, and everyone is okay. Now we're just waiting to see what's going to happen next, how it's going to develop. Lots of parties, international players, are calling for both sides of the fighting here to stop it and to negotiate, including the West and Russia and the leaders of the opposition, and even the authorities say that they're ready to negotiate. But the thing is, the leadership of the right-wing radicals, who have been the most active part of this protest and fighting, they have been saying that they haven't been taking part in any negotiations, and they're ready to take it to the end, they say, until the authorities, current authorities in Ukraine, step down. Riots have been continuing in other parts of the country, and rioters there have been attacking and trying to gain control. And as far as we understand, in western parts of the country, they have gained control of lots of administrative buildings.
Well, as you said, similar rioting is going on all across the country now. In this footage, we can see the governor of one of Ukraine's regions being tried in a kangaroo court, handcuffed to a fence in front of a crowd. Trying to calm them down, but was heavily beaten and drenched in cold water. And in the western Ukrainian city of Lvov, local police say at least 1,000 firearms have been seized from a local army base. Security forces now fear the guns will be used against them. Well, the president does share responsibility for this chaos, for not acting sooner. But this is exactly what the radical opposition wanted. That's the view of the head of a major Russian foreign affairs think tank.
Truth is not what they're looking for. They're looking for the national revolution, as the leader of the extreme right-wing, right sector says. They have been dreaming about this moment for a long time. They constitutional means to preserve the constitutional order. Actually, the president of the country has the duty to defend the citizens and to preserve the constitutional order. Until now, President Yanukovych has been evading giving orders to law enforcement, has not given them all the necessary means to protect themselves and to protect the peaceful citizens of Ukraine. So part of the responsibility is on him as well.
Well, Martin Seif, his chief global analyst at the Globalist Research Centre, says the rioters at the heart of the unrest are a threat across the whole of Europe.
The forces that are breaking up Ukraine are seeking to break up Ukraine are the same forces that are seeking to destabilize Western European nations. There are major secessionist movements within Western European nations. We see Scotland very peacefully about to become independent with its referendum vote scheduled for later this year. Spain has acted very successfully to prevent the disintegration of its country, especially the Barcelona-Catalonia region. The Northern League is a very powerful force, a very relatively moderate, responsible force. It's constitutional. But if rioting was taking place on the streets in Pacific nations of Spain, France, Italy, Britain, with the express purpose of toppling the government and splitting the state, Europe would not be fanning those forces of destruction on, they would be reining them in.
Well, I'll be back in a minute with more reaction for you from Europe on this ongoing violence in Ukraine. Martin's put the wrong fuel in his car. That's a big deal. If he misses a date with Jenny, she might think he doesn't care. But she might write a song about his peaky eyes. Don't worry, Martin. Unlike others, we'll cover you even if you fill up with the wrong fuel. Green flag, no matter what.
A low price usually means there's limits to what you get. Well, not anymore. PlusNet are making a stand. Right now, get totally unlimited broadband from just £2.50 a month for 12 months when you take line rental. Now that's a deal. Get unlimited broadband from £2.50 a month. Now that's how you do unlimited. Hurry! Get totally unlimited broadband from £2.50 a month until the 25th of February. Go online or call 0800 313 4444 now. PlusNet will do you proud.
President Yanukovych has once again reiterated his readiness to hold snap elections if this does help contain the mayhem. That's according to the Polish Prime Minister. Meanwhile, the EU's diplomats in Brussels have come up with a solution of their own to force peace with sanctions. Marty's Tessocilia has more on the reaction from Europe now.
The EU foreign ministers here in Brussels have agreed to impose targeted sanctions on individuals they think are responsible for instigating the violence in the country. Now, those sanctions would come in the form of asset freezes, travel and visa bans, and also a ban on export of materials that could be used, they say, for internal repression. This could include some anti-riot gear or military hardware as well. However, no names were mentioned, and the details were scarce of the actual implementation of these sanctions. And Catherine Ashton, the foreign policy chief, in making this statement, had put the responsibility squarely on the shoulders of the Ukrainian government in taking the lead in ending the violence on the streets. But prior to this decision, there have been several foreign ministers who, like the Dutch foreign minister, who had said that some members of the protest leaders should also be included in that list. And that's what we're hearing in some of the corridors here in Brussels. Now, it seems also that the EU is waiting to see what happens as the continuing discussions happen in Kiev between the German, French, and Polish foreign ministers on the ground. They're speaking to both sides. They want to see how that develops, and it seems that they're positive that there's